The sun dipped low over Redwater Valley, spilling its dying light across the earth as though trying to warn the land of the trouble riding in with the evening wind. Bramble Creek lay quiet under that fading glow, its wooden storefronts lined in long shadows that clung like secrets. The air carried a restless stillness, something between silence and dread, and every living soul felt it, even if they didn't yet know why. The town had survived droughts, raids, tempests, and long winters, but storms made by men always came with a different kind of ruin. Mara Ellison stepped off the general store porch with the measured calm of someone holding herself together by will alone. Her boots struck the dirt with a muted thud that didn't match the pounding of her heart. She kept her chin lifted, posture steady, though the tremor beneath her ribs threatened to undo her. A wisp of wind tugged at the loose strands of her dark hair, and her faded calico dress fluttered around her legs like a whisper urging her to run. She carried only a small satchel, but inside her chest was a weight, so heavy it nearly turned her breath sharp. She had seen the glint earlier, faint but unmistakable. Not sunlight on stone, not a trick of the valley's heat. It had been metal, and there was only one man whose presence gleamed like that in the distance, Colt Warner, the cowboy whose pursuit had stripped the last remnants of peace from her life. He rode, with purpose, with ownership, with a hunger for control that made her blood run cold. She did not need to see his face to know he was close. The land felt tighter when he drew near. Bramble Creek had once admired Colt's swagger, his quick smile, his effortless charm. People loved a legend, and he wore the shape of one well, tall, sharp-featured, carved by dust and sun. But Mara had seen beyond the easy charisma. She had met the quiet, coiled violence that simmered under his skin. She had learned too late that the kind of man who could captivate a room could also crush a life without hesitation. It was that truth she carried now, the truth that forced her to flee before he reached her again. The street was still, but not empty. Sheriff Branning leaned against the saloon window, watching her with the weary understanding of a man who had seen too many battles he was no longer strong enough to fight. His badge had dulled over the years, and so had the authority behind it. He tipped his hat as she passed, but didn't call out. He knew why she was leaving. He had told her only hours earlier that if she wanted to escape, she had to ride before Colt stepped foot in town. And so she moved now, each breath tighter than the last. The roan gelding she'd borrowed waited at the alley's end, its ears twitching at the distant hum of approaching hooves. Mara quickened her pace, but forced herself not to run. Running would draw attention. Running would confirm fear. Fear was something Colt detected, like a wolf catching the scent of blood. She swallowed hard, fighting the dryness in her throat as she reached the horse and placed a steady hand along its flank. "Easy," she whispered, though the word trembled. The gelding stood calm, more loyal than she felt deserving of. She worked quickly to untie the reins, glancing toward the far end of the alley. The ridge beyond the town flickered with movement, distant but undeniable. Her window of escape was shrinking fast. Then came the sound she dreaded most. Hooves, sharp and unrelenting, striking the hard earth with the fury of pursuit. She closed her eyes for a heartbeat, letting the truth settle. Colt was closer than she'd feared. Too close. She swung onto the horse with practiced ease, gripping the reins so tightly the leather bit into her palms. The moment she nudged the gelding forward, another sound cut across the valley. The crack of a rifle shot, echoing like the sky splitting open. Her breath seized. It was not aimed at her, not yet, but it was a message. Colt was letting her know the chase had begun. As she guided the horse out of the alley, she saw him. A solitary figure, standing at the far end of the street, framed by the last bruised streaks of daylight. His coat swayed in the wind, his stance confident, predatory. Even from a distance, she felt the weight of his stare, a cold hand closing around her spine. For a moment, the world held its breath. "Mara," Colt called, his voice cutting clean through the stillness. "You run too much." She didn't answer. With a sharp kick, she sent the gelding surging forward. Dust exploded beneath its hooves as they raced past shuttered windows and trembling door frames. Behind her, Colt's stallion roared into motion, faster than any creature built of flesh should be. The chase tore through the valley like a streak of lightning searching for ground to burn. Mara leaned low over the horse's neck, her breath ragged. The canyon lay ahead, 2 miles of open land between her and potential safety. If she could make it there, the winding passageways might hide her long enough to slip away into the cliffs. But the open stretch left her exposed, and Colt was gaining ground with terrifying ease. She risked a look back. Colt's expression was carved in cold determination, his eyes fixed on her with a terrifying certainty. He had not come merely to retrieve her. He had come to reclaim control. But as she neared the canyon mouth, more figures emerged along the ridge, riders silhouetted against the dying light, watching like vultures waiting for the kill. Colt had brought others. Mara's pulse spiked, but she did not falter. She rode into the canyon shadow as the sun finally disappeared, carrying with her a desperate truth. The night ahead would demand everything she had left. Night settled over the canyon with a cold, merciless stillness, swallowing the last scraps of daylight as Mara urged the roan deeper into the winding pass. The walls rose on either side like the ribs of some ancient beast, jagged and looming, turning her breath sharp and shallow. Each hoofbeat echoed through the stone corridor, a reminder that every second she spent alive was borrowed. Behind her, Colt's pursuit had quieted, but silence in a place like this was never safety. It was a warning, the kind that made the hairs on her arms rise. The canyon twisted left, then right, narrowing until the stars vanished overhead. The air thickened with the damp chill of unseen pools and the distant drip of water sliding down rock. Mara slowed the horse to avoid stumbling on the uneven path. Her muscles screamed as she dismounted, boots crunching on gravel. She let the gelding drink from a shallow pool and pressed her back against the canyon wall, fighting for breath. She needed a plan. She needed a miracle. But the frontier rarely offered either. A faint scrape echoed behind her. Not a hoof, a boot. Her hand flew to the small knife hidden beneath her sleeve, though she knew it was a pitiful weapon against Colt's firepower. Still, she braced. Shadows rippled across the stone. Then a figure stepped into view, a tall man with a worn, duster dark beard and eyes that carried the weight of 50 rough winters. He raised an open palm before she could speak. "Easy, miss," he said. "If I meant harm, you wouldn't have heard me coming." Mara didn't lower the blade. "State your business." The man nodded as though he respected her defiance. "Name's Beckett Rhodes. Trapper. Scout. Professional, mind my own damn business." He eyed the horse, then the canyon mouth behind her. "Saw you riding hard. Saw trouble riding harder. Thought you might need a hand." She shook her head, chest tight. "You don't understand. The man chasing me, he doesn't stop. Not until he wins." Beckett shifted his stance, and something steely flashed in his expression. "Then he's used to winning against the wrong kind of people." Mara looked past him, toward the vast darkness stretching back toward the valley. "Colt Warner," she whispered. The name tasted like iron. "He's got men with him." Beckett's brows rose. "Figures. A rattler never crawls alone." Before Mara could respond, the canyon trembled with a distant rumble. Hooves, many of them, rolling through the stone channel like thunder trapped underground. She felt the blood drain from her face. Colt was closing in, shepherding her into a dead end she hadn't realized she'd been running toward. Beckett noted the panic sharpening her breathing and gestured to follow. "This way," he muttered and led her along a narrow break between the rocks. The passage climbed sharply, twisting into a steep ascent that forced Mara to grip the wall with one hand while guiding the horse with the other. Loose stones tumbled under her boots. Her knees burned, her lungs seared, but fear powered her steps. Beckett moved with surprising agility for a man carrying enough weapons to outfit a small regiment. They reached a ledge overlooking the canyon floor. Below them, torchlight flickered as Colt's riders poured in, their shadows stretching unnatural and menacing across the rock. Mara dropped to her knees, clutching the gelding's reins. Beckett crouched beside her and peered over the edge. "Bastards travel thick," he muttered, "and they know this land better than I hoped." Colt rode at the front, lantern swinging from his saddle horn, its glow carving his profile out of the darkness like a statue molded from arrogance and cruelty. He drew his horse to a halt and scanned the canyon with the slow, deliberate calm of a predator that had already chosen where the kill would happen. "Mara," Colt's voice boomed, bouncing off the canyon walls. "You're only making things worse." Her heart clenched. She pressed a fist to her mouth to quiet any sound. Beckett shot her a glance, reading her fear like a map. "Why is he after you?" he asked softly. "Because he believes he owns everything he touches," she whispered. "And because I finally learned that I do not belong to him." Beckett nodded slowly. "Good reason to run. Better reason to fight." A torchbearer approached Colt, murmuring something Mara couldn't hear. Colt's jaw tightened. He kicked his stallion forward, scanning the canyon floor with renewed vigilance. His voice sharpened. "You're not alone, Mara. You've got help. That means someone dies tonight." Beckett's hand slid to the revolver at his hip. He's talking big for a man who doesn't know where the bullets are coming from. "No," Mara whispered, grabbing his arm. "You can't shoot. Not now. He'll find us. He'll trap us here." Beckett considered her words, then slowly eased back. "Then what's your plan?" The question hit her harder than she expected. She had been running for so long that she'd forgotten the necessity of choosing a direction. Survival wasn't enough anymore. She needed purpose, a destination, a belief that tomorrow could exist. "The northern ridge," she said finally. "There's an old hunting cabin. Belonged to my father. It's hidden well. Supplies inside. If I can reach it, I can survive long enough to slip into the timberlands." Beckett gave a long exhale. "If that's where you're headed, I'll get you there." She blinked, startled. "Why would you help me?" "Because men like Colt think the world bends for them," Beckett said. "And someone's got to remind them it doesn't." Below them, Colt lifted his lantern, its warm glow sweeping across the canyon walls like a searching eye. Mara and Beckett pressed against the rock as the light washed dangerously close. Seconds stretched. Mara's heartbeat thundered in her ears. Then the lantern turned away. Colt signaled his men to search deeper into the canyon. The riders spread out, torches bobbing like fireflies consumed by rage. Beckett touched her shoulder. "Time to move," quiet as a church shadow. Mara stood, legs trembling but resolve hardening. The chase wasn't over. The danger hadn't passed, but for the first time since she'd fled Bramble Creek, she wasn't running alone. And that, she realized, changed everything. Dawn crept across the sky in thin red streaks, the kind that warned travelers that the day ahead would not be gentle. Mara and Beckett moved along the ridge at a brisk but cautious pace, the cold air biting their faces as the trail narrowed under patches of brittle frost. The roan gelding snorted clouds of steam, its hooves clacking against stone that echoed down into the canyon below. Mara kept glancing over her shoulder, haunted by the knowledge that Colt rode somewhere behind them. His pursuit was never loud. It was patient. It was precise. And it was inevitable. Beckett's voice cut through the wind. "Keep low on the climb. He'll expect you to take the open slope." Mara nodded. Her muscles ached from the night's flight, but fear drove her forward. She had no choice but to press on. "The cabin's not far once we clear the ridge," she said, more to reassure herself than Beckett. "You sure it's stocked?" he asked. "My father kept it filled year-round. Traps, tools, rifles, dry goods. Enough to last a winter," she answered. Beckett grunted. "Then Colt know that too." The truth stung. She had always known Colt paid attention to everything. Her habits, her fears, the places she trusted. Her father's cabin had been her sanctuary growing up. That meant Colt would see it as a cage. A shot cracked across the morning stillness. The sound ripped through the air like a blade, sending a flock of crows bursting from the pines. Mara flinched, clutching the horse's reins. Beckett shoved her behind a boulder just as a second bullet ricocheted off the rock face, spraying stone chips across the path. "Damn it," Beckett hissed. "They're already flanking." Mara peered out from a rock. Below, shapes moved through the frost-glazed brush, 3 riders advancing from the south, sweeping the ridge with rifles raised. Colt wasn't among them, but she knew he was somewhere close. He always kept his distance until the moment mattered most. Beckett drew his revolver. "I'll give you cover. You take the horse and run north. Stay in the tree line." "No," she whispered fiercely. "You'll be killed." He gave her a grim smile. "I've dodged worse." Another shot slammed into the boulder. The impact rattled through her bones. She tightened her grip on the reins, torn between survival and guilt. Beckett wasn't responsible for her troubles, yet he risked his life without hesitation. That fact rooted itself deep inside her, stirring something stubborn and brave. "I'm not leaving you," Mara said. "We go together." Beckett's eyes hardened, not with anger but with respect. "Then keep your head down." The riders closed in quickly, moving with coordinated precision. Beckett fired first, dropping one from the saddle. The second returned fire, the bullet carving a burning path along Beckett's arm. He didn't falter, pumping another round through the air that forced the riders to scatter. "Go," he barked. Mara mounted the horse and yanked the reins. The gelding bolted forward, Beckett sprinting beside her until the ground dipped into the thick timberlands ahead. Branches whipped against them as they plunged into the trees, the world narrowing into frantic movement, breath, hoofbeats, snapping limbs. Behind them, the remaining rider cursed, the sound fading as the forest swallowed them whole. Branches parted as they burst into a small clearing. At the far edge sat the cabin, weathered wood, stone chimney, smoke rising faintly from vents where cold air seeped in. It looked abandoned, yet familiar, a memory preserved in frost. Mara dismounted and rushed to the door, pushing it open with trembling hands. The interior greeted her with the scent of old pine and dust. A rifle hung over the fireplace. Shelves held tins of beans, matches, dried meat. Her father's handwriting lay carved into the table's edge. For a brief moment, the place felt like a refuge. Beckett followed her inside, gripping his bleeding arm. "We need to fortify the door," he said. Mara pulled a wooden beam from the corner and braced it against the entry. Beckett scanned the windows, checking sight lines. "He'll come," Mara whispered. "Colt doesn't stop. He can't." Beckett loaded the rifle with slow, measured movements. "Then we stop him first." The world outside the cabin fell eerily quiet. No birds, no rustling leaves, just the faint whistle of wind threading through pine needles. Mara stood by the table, her pulse thundering in her ears. The fear that had chased her for months now condensed into one single truth. She would not survive if she kept running. She had to fight. A horse snorted outside. Mara froze. Beckett motioned for silence, gripping the rifle tight. Footsteps crunched softly in the snow, measured, deliberate, unhurried. Colt's voice drifted through the stillness, calm as a sermon. "Mara, you made quite the mess." She closed her eyes, steadying her breath. "You're cornered," Colt continued. "Beckett can't save you. No one can. Come out and this ends clean." Beckett lifted the rifle and took position by the window. Mara stepped beside him, her hand trembling around her knife. She could picture Colt's expression outside, smug, certain, savoring the moment he believed was already his. A shadow moved past the window. Beckett fired. A shout rose from outside, followed by the thud of a body hitting snow. But it wasn't Colt's voice. It was one of his men. Colt's laughter echoed through the trees. "You'll have to do better." A crash exploded at the back of the cabin. The rear door splintered inward as Colt burst through with brutal speed. Beckett spun and fired, but Colt slammed into him, knocking the gun aside. The 2 men crashed against the table, wood shattering under their weight. Mara lunged forward, knife raised, but Colt caught her wrist and twisted hard, sending the blade skittering across the floor. His grip tightened, his face inches from hers, eyes burning with a vicious triumph. "You should have stayed where you belonged," he growled. Her pulse thundered. Her fear turned to fury. She kicked hard, driving her boot into his knee. Colt staggered. Beckett seized the moment, ramming into him with full force. The impact sent Colt crashing into the wall. The rifle clattered beside Mara's feet. She grabbed it. Her hands shook. Her breath faltered. Colt rose, hatred carved into every line of his face. "Mara," he snarled. She fired. The shot split the cabin, ringing through the trees, rolling across the valley like a final verdict. Colt dropped to his knees, shock etched across his features, then collapsed onto the cabin floor. Silence followed. Heavy, absolute, undeniable. Beckett steadied himself against the broken table, blood trailing down his sleeve. Mara lowered the rifle slowly, her breath breaking into unsteady gasps. "He's gone," Beckett said quietly. Mara nodded, tears flooding her eyes. "It's over." But deep inside, she knew the road ahead was only just beginning.